Hello and welcome back to the Luke Deckard Show. I'm your host, Luke Deckard. I'm really excited for tonight. Tonight, my good friend Mathew Booth and I are going to be diving into Roman Polanski's Chinatown. If you've never seen Chinatown, you don't know what you're missing. So I'm really with no further ado, let's bring Mathew in. Mathew Booth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Nice to be back.
Evening. It's good to have you back. So we ages ago when we did a show about noir fiction, noir movies and things like that. I can't remember how long ago that was. It was not that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
we talked about there was the suggestion that we might actually talk about Chinatown during that during that show, but in the course of me trying to watch all of these movies, I forgot to watch Chinatown. So we couldn't talk
we got
about
carried
it.
away in the discussion anyway.
So I think so. I think we did. That was an ambitious show talking about just noir, the genre of film noir, for 2 hours, and trying to cover everything is impossible. But we had a good crack at it, and it was thoroughly entertaining. But we didn't get to Chinatown for that particular reason. Again, we might not have, but I was very happy because a couple of months later, I finally sat down and watched Chinatown. And it's one of those movies, Matt, where I watched it, I was like, why have I not seen this sooner? Like, it's everything that I love when it comes to like the tough guy, hard-boiled noir stuff. I had the same feeling when I watched Blade Runner for the first time. I didn't watch Blade Runner for the first time until like 2017, 2016 is when I finally watched Blade. And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't realize that this was like a neo-noir, cyber-noir movie. I just knew the name Blade Runner and Harrison Ford was in it, and that it wasn't very good. And I was like, wait a minute, this movie has Harrison Ford as a PI, and it's great. So there we go. When did you first see Chinatown?
Well, quite the opposite to you, Luke. I saw it about 30 years ago for the first time. And I watched it for the same reasons you're saying, that I was a big Raymond Chandler fan. I've been a crime fiction fan since I was 10 or 11.
Yeah.
With Sherlock Holmes and Christie and all the rest of it. And I graduated onto Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. So I was watching things like The Big Sleep and Murder My Sweet, Maltese Falcon, things like that.
Yes.
And it must have been on television at some point. I knew Jack Nicholson was, obviously. I'd seen him in Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the photos of him with the bandage on his nose, and thinking, what is that?
Yeah.
Why has he got a bandage on his nose? And not only that, how brave for one of the biggest stars of the day to have his face half covered for most of the film.
Yeah.
So I read the write-up of it in the newspaper or whatever it would be, and it said detective noir film. So I watched it and was absolutely blown away by it.
Yeah. What's funny is you mentioned the bandage on his nose, and yeah, it is funny because you see it and it's so absurd. It's so absurd.
Yeah. It's a brilliant piece of cinematic marketing, though, isn't it? Because it really does make you say,
yeah,
what's happened?
It does, and it's quite it's an embarrassing. It's embarrassingly big, and I don't feel that you look at, he doesn't look like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, or he doesn't look like that like sexy tough guy where you're like, oh yeah, he's tough, he's got a cut, he's he's not Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Predator or whatever. He's just this bum.
There's a few bits with Daniel Craig in Casino Royale where he just has little stitches over.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this is it's really intrusive on Nicholson's face.
Yes, yes,
but it's realistic. It's what you would have to have if
yes.
you suffer what he suffers.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So
and it does make him look ridiculous, and I think that's important because he's viewed very much, or the private eye generally is viewed as a very ridiculous man. You know, Philip Marlowe's always been told you're a stupid man in a stupid business, and things like that. So for people to have something physical to mock him with, I think is a great touch. I think it's a really good touch.
It's something we'll get into a little bit later on because it also, in some ways, it underplays or undervalues the hard-boiled detective, because even Chandler and Spencer and Spade and all those characters, Easy Rollins, they all are still pretty tough and cool. They never have injuries that are kind of embarrassing, which is it fascinates me that happens here. I guess let me just give a bit of background to the movie before we get started. For anyone listening who has not seen it, obviously there's going to be spoilers. It's like a 50-year-old movie, so what do you expect? But directed by Roman Polanski, stars Jack Nicholson as Jake Gittes, Faye Dunaway as Evelyn Cross, and John Huston as Noah Cross. The summary of the movie is that Mrs. Mulwray hires Detective Jake, who specializes in matrimonial cases, to spy on her husband, the builder of the city's water system. He finds himself in a web of deceit when Mr. Mulwray dies. Now, obviously, this film is it's interesting. It's a bit of a pastiche. It's a historical film, but it's also pastiching films of the 1930s and 1940s, and also just, you know, that Raymond Chandler hard-boiled style. But I love the fact that even in the opening credits, it feels like you're watching an old movie. What did you think about the opening credits and the opening music?
Absolutely, and the music, the Jerry Goldsmith music is fantastic. Because you're right, there's that sort of Art Deco background, and it's sepia. You know, it looks like an old RKO B movie.
Yes,
that's been polished and clean to within an inch of its life.
Yes,
to look good for the modern, what would then be the modern age. But I think they're really clever opening credits, and I think it sets up very clearly to me what the film does all the time, which is to present itself as a typical 1930s film noir private eye story.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's subverting that all the time, and it's doing something quite different with almost every scene.
Yes.
So, like you say about Philip Marlowe and Jake Gittes, Marlowe is famously a lone wolf who's quite shabby and down at heel.
Yes.
Gittes has got agents working. He's got subordinates, and he's got a nice office and a secretary. And he's sharply dressed. You know, so it's what you expect a PI to look like, but not quite.
Yeah.
He's got all the trappings. He's got the fedora, the office, the whiskey bottle.
Yeah.
But he's clearly doing very well for himself. You know, and you never see Philip Marlowe get a contract out and get the client to sign it and say the contract's for you. You know,
no.
First thing Gittes does,
yes,
to everyone who hires him, he's hired quite a few times in the film.
Yes,
he says, "I'll get my secretary to draw up the papers."
Yes,
you know, and so it's doing that all the time. It's subverting what you think you're going to expect before, you know, almost as soon as you expect it.
Yes, yeah,
and it starts from those titles.
I agree. I love that. I love the fact that he's always like, "Let me just get you a contract drawn up." It's great. The opening, I am very fascinated by the opening because I've now watched this movie twice in my life. And there's an interesting juxtaposition between the beginning, or not juxtaposition, parallel between the beginning and the end. I don't want to spoil the ending just yet, but I want to talk about the beginning. In the very opening scene, Jake is showing some pictures of a woman and a man engaged in some coitus, and a man, the man looking at the photos is the woman's husband, and he's distraught. to find out that his wife has been having an affair and all that sort of stuff. The opening really sets the tone and tells you what this film is going to be about. It's going to be about lies, scandal, sin, broken relationships. And in that one moment with this at first you think, oh, poor guy. You it captures everything this film is going to explore in one scene. Because later on down the line, when we catch up with this guy again, we find out that he just beat his wife into submission, which is awful, but also speaks to the problems of the day, but also just the kind of general sense of what it's sort of foreshadowing other assaults that are happening within relationships, and it gives this sense of certain people are just trapped, I think. I don't know. What do you think about that opening scene? What did it tell you?
Well, that pretty much it sets up very, very quickly what Gittis is, what Jake is. We know he's a private detective. We know that he's uncovered this adultery. Later on, he says that marriage is his métier, which is another change to Marlowe, who never touches divorce cases as famously. But it sets up that he's solved that case, for want of a better word, successfully.
Yes.
And that he's obviously good at what he's done, at what he does.
Yes.
Because he's got the evidence, he's done what he was hired to do.
Yes.
From a plot point of view and a structure point of view, it sets up that Curly, who's the man concerned, who is also Rocky's brother-in-law in the Rocky films.
Yes, I knew he was familiar, and I thought that was who he was. Yeah.
He can't pay Jake's fee.
Yes.
So he says, whenever you need a favor, and that's a throwaway line that later on becomes of great significance.
Yes.
And helps the climax to play out. So, the film is doing that all the time. It's showing one thing at the beginning that you then forget about, that turns out to be extremely important later on.
Yes, yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, where again, because you there's an interesting through line in the film about sort of what does Jake Gittis want financially?
Yeah,
and there was a sense early on that he's looking for money. He's drawing up contracts. This is his fee. Da, 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 da. But again, in that opening scene, what does he do? He lets his friend go. He doesn't make him pay. He's like, oh, yeah. And that tells you something about Jake, about what he is about, what is important to him, right?
It does. It tells you almost everything you need to know in the opening scene. You're right. He does want money.
Yeah,
and he wants the work. He's good at the work, but he's also got a sentimental streak.
Yes.
In that he will let people off the fee and let them owe it to him.
Yes.
But also that he will cash in that. You learn that he will cash in those favors when he needs to.
Yes.
And as the film progresses, you learn that Jake is a man who, when he's wronged, as he later is, he then is like a dog with a bone and he won't let go. And it isn't then just about the money or following the case, following the cheating husband or wife or whatever it might be and pocketing the fee. It then becomes personal.
It does.
And then it becomes much more important to him.
Yes.
But another thing that opening scene does for me is set up a major theme of the film, which is this is the first time that what you see, particularly in a photograph, is the truth. Almost every other time you see a photograph, or you see somebody sees something from afar or or whatever, they misinterpret it.
Yes.
Right until the end.
Yeah.
This is the only time that a photograph tells the truth, and that Jake's eyes and our eyes, because we see it alongside Jake.
Yes.
tell us the truth. Every other situation deceives you.
Yeah, I read it. I read an interesting article about Chinatown that actually spoke a lot about eyes and seeing, and that everyone is sort of kind of not seeing what's there. In that, Jake Gittes doesn't see what's sort of in front of him. The
Yeah.
character of Evelyn has a problem with her eye. There,
Yes.
there's the spectacles that are in the pond.
Yeah.
There's a lot of references to eyesight and not seeing clearly and needing to see clearly. That
Yeah.
I think is quite it's quite fascinating to me.
Yeah, and there's the whole business of when Walsh has
Yeah.
taken the photos,
Yes.
and it's Cross and Mulray, Noah Cross and Hollis Mulray arguing.
Yes.
Jake says, Christ's sake, is this how you spent your day? When
Yeah.
really what he's holding in his hands is the key to the whole mystery.
Exactly. It's everything right there. Everything
is there, and he doesn't see it, And so, in actual fact, Walsh hasn't wasted his day.
No.
He's done the most important bit of investigating in the whole of the film.
Yes.
And the other great scene I like is when Mulray is giving the speech at the town hall.
Yes.
At the planning committee meeting. And it ends with that great thing with all the sheep coming in.
Yeah.
But there we learn again, Jake doesn't see it because he's got an idea that Hollis is cheating on his wife.
Yeah.
But he's given the crux of the plot and Mulray's objection to it there and then. So suddenly he learns there, but doesn't know he's learnt it, that actually Mulray is a man of integrity.
Yes.
He's a man. Yes. He's an honest man.
Yes.
And everything. Then when you see him with the girl,
yes,
we're misinterpreting that because of a preconceived idea that Jake has also got.
Right.
And only as with detective stories, only when you are shown the full truth at the end do you realize how much he's missed, and so does he.
Yes.
The clues are all there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to this theme of people are constantly seeing the truth in front of them and not seeing it for what it is.
Yes. And I love that because speaking of when he's tailing Mr. Mulray, and he's going to that sort of dead reservoir or whatever it is, where the kid comes up to him on the horse and whatnot, and then he goes and sits all night and waits for the water to be expelled into the ocean to sort of, I guess, prove
to
what
himself.
He suspects.
Yeah. And Jake's reaction to that is, after that great idea of putting the pocket watch under the wheel.
Love that bit.
That's great. So it cracks and shows the time that he left. So you just said Hollis is there to prove to himself that what he suspects is true. Jake's reaction is to say, Christ, he was there all night.
Yes.
And he dismisses it.
Yes. Like, what was he doing all night?
So, and he totally dismisses it because he's concentrating on a fake relationship he doesn't know is also a deception.
Yes.
And all that keeps going on throughout the film. That idea of what you see is not what you get is throughout the whole thing. There's examples galore. And like I say, almost every, the misinterpretation of albacore and applecore because Walsh has misheard it.
Yes.
Jake sees that flag and the albacore club logo.
Yeah.
All the way through the film.
He does. Yes.
It's in Hollis's counterpart's office.
Yep.
Played by the bloke out of Magnum.
Oh yes, played by what's his name? What's his name in Magnum?
John Hillerman.
No, what's his name in Magnum? What's his name? Higgins, that's it. Yes, Higgins. Yeah. I was like, it's Higgins.
Well, it's him, and he's got the clue behind him. I mean, I think Jake looks at.
I think so.
Of Cross in front of the club.
Yes, they look at the two together, looking. Yes. Hollis and Cross standing together with that above them. Yeah.
Oh, that is brilliant. Oh,
yes.
I mean, it's foreshadowing as clue dropping.
Yes.
In its best form, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I think so too. I think this is probably a good time to say, if anyone is watching, do make sure to like and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. But anyway, back to Jake. Back to Jake. So I want to talk about Jake as a character a little bit more. I find his duality quite interesting. I like that he is he's an honest guy, but he makes a living by exposing people's dark secrets and essentially ruining people's lives. It's also interesting to me that he does sort of the one job that our favorite PIs avoid the most,
Yeah,
which is the matrimony
yeah,
cases. They don't want to do it. They never want to do it. They're always like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. But this is the one that he has made his bread and butter on, and he's happy to do it. But I
yeah.
love the conflict of like, is he an honest man doing an honest day's work or not, which I think is wonderfully brought to a head in the barbershop scene. What do you think?
Absolutely. Just a couple of things about that. He is everything that every other PI isn't.
Yeah.
They all, Marlowe at one point says, only the fairly honest. Do you do all types of work? And he says, only the fairly honest kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know he means, and he's constantly being called a keyhole peeper and
Yes.
things like that. And Jake is that. That's exactly what Jake is.
He is.
And like I said earlier, he's clearly made enough money out of doing it to be quite comfortably off.
Yes.
Because it shows where the money is if you were a private eye in the 1930s.
Yes.
But the barbershop scene absolutely does. And it shows how he justifies it to himself. Because I think Jake thinks he's a necessary evil.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who want to know the truth. People are unfaithful in marriage, and the cheated partner wants to know for certain, or wants to know if their suspicions are accurate. So, and he says to the bloke in the barber's chair, people come to me with a particular type of problem. I help people with a particular type of problem. And he also says to him, have you foreclosed on any mortgages today?
Yes, I love that line.
So your line of work is no dirtier than mine.
Yes.
And he says, I'm just trying to make an honest living. He says it a few times. I'm just trying to make an honest living. Yeah. And someone's got to do the dirty work. Yeah. And I think he can justify it to himself like that. I think that's what he does. Yeah, he says this is a dirty job, but someone's got to do it, and I'm good at it.
It's funny because and you can see that everyone he meets thinks he's out for money. You think about his first meeting with Noah Cross, who calls him Mr. Gets or Gets. What do you want to get? What are you trying to get? He also asks him, are you sleeping with my daughter? Like, what are you after?
What are you out for?
Yeah, which it fascinates me. But also, even Evelyn, his Cross's daughter, is constantly trying or constantly thinking she needs to pay him more money to get him to like leave the case alone.
Yeah, and at one point she says to him, I'll send you a check.
Yeah,
and he says it's not about the money.
Yeah,
and this is part of his character change. Once he's realised that he's been duped.
Yes.
Once he realizes that the first Mrs. Mulray was a plant.
Yes.
And that Evelyn is the real one.
Yeah.
And he says to her, whoever set up your husband set up me.
Yeah.
That's when I think his view on life changes. That's his inciting incident.
Yes.
I'm being done over here, and I want to know why.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's very obvious that he's been picked because he is the local expert on exposing errant husbands.
Yes.
So they've chosen to put Mulray in disgrace.
Yeah.
Who best to prove that he's a cheat? Jake Gittes. So they're both in the frame. So if I can put it this way, if Jake's the hunter and Mulray is the hunted, they suddenly both become the hunted.
Yes. Yes.
And once Jake realizes that, the money goes out the window, and he says to Evelyn, I think it's the restaurant scene.
It's the restaurant. Yeah, I love that. That's it. I love that.
He says, it's not about the money.
Yes.
It might have been before, and to a certain degree and to a large extent, I think it was about the money before, because he clearly likes nice clothes. He clearly likes, a good shave and his haircut.
Yes.
Because he can say to the barber, is this bimbo a regular customer, Barney?
Yeah.
So we know that he goes in there all the time.
Yes.
So he obviously likes to look good. He drives a good car. He's a man of. He's a man who likes his appearance. So he
Yes.
clearly needs the money to do that and wants the
Yeah.
money to do that. But then, as private eyes often do, they discover there's something more important going on.
Yes.
And it's interesting that when Philip Marlowe can run a murder inquiry like the Metropolitan Police used to be able to.
Yes.
Jake Gittis, as soon as he's on the murder inquiry for his own ends, he's pretty much useless. He makes a lot of mistakes.
Yes. That brings me to my next point on Jake, actually, and that is he's not the tough guy that Marlowe and Spade are. He's in many ways, he's kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
He's a little bit sorry, I think. And
he's got the attitude, but
yes.
not the heft to
Yes.
carry it through, which is why he can get beaten up by a load of farmers.
Yes, and that was. I love the fact that he is that in each of these moments where you would imagine the typical PI would fight his way out and would come out victorious or at least get away. The farm scene where his glasses are smashed, his hair's all disheveled. His nice look that he tries to go for is completely shattered, and he looks goofy and silly, and then he's knocked out.
And the ultimate insult, the wound on his nose has opened up again. And
yes,
it's brilliant.
Speaking of the wound on the nose, this obviously comes in the film where he's basically onto what Mr. Mulray was onto with the water that is being leaked. And basically what is going on in the movie is that certain people with a lot of power are trying to dry out a specific part of land so that they can buy up that land. And they're redirecting water, and it's all kind of water corruption, similar to one of the worst Bond films, Quantum of Solace, but actually this is really good and interesting.
This is done well.
Yeah, it's like you can do a good water corruption storyline. Just Quantum of Solace couldn't do it, but this movie did. Anyway, he's out there looking around, trying to find out to see what Mr. Hollis was onto, and in this moment he gets accosted by two guys, one who he insulted previously, and his buddy who's named as the guy with the knife, who is played by Roman Polanski. That's Roman Polanski, the director of the movie, playing this scene. And it's funny to me because he's a short little guy. Roman Polanski's not a big guy. This guy is very. I mean, I don't know how tall Jack Nicholson is, but in comparison, he's to Roman Polanski, he's much taller.
Yeah.
And what's funny is this short little guy with a knife just teases him and taunts him, and then slices his nose open, and he is made quite pathetic. And they're like, do you understand not to mess with us? Do you understand? And they make him say it. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're kind of a lame duck, Jake.
Yeah. Except, well, first of all, there's the lovely touch of the nosy private. I mean, they make the joke. The nosy private eye loses his nose. I mean, that's just. Yeah. And there's a great bit where Polanski's got the knife up his nostril, and he's just sort of almost caressing it.
Yes.
Yeah. As if he's saying, do you think I dare do this, Jake?
Yes.
Do you think I dare do this? Well, I do. And it's a great effect. It's a brilliant effect.
It looks great.
And then you're right. He gets kicked to the ground, and he gets kicked into submission.
Yes.
And the next time you see him, he's fully on with the bandage.
Yes. The big
he looks
bandage.
Down. He looks, beaten, defeated, and useless then as well.
Yes.
But then I think it's the spirit to carry on. I think that you've got to admire it. But you're right. There's no way he's Sam Spade.
No, he's not tough like Marlowe or Spade, but he has he has the right moral compass and the tenacity to keep going.
And there's something quite. I mean, first of all, I think it's more realistic to have. I mean, Marlowe gets beaten on the back of the head every book, and he's fine. You know, he doesn't suffer any damage or so. At least the bandage is a realistic thing, as we said before.
Yes,
but I think it's also, again, maybe this is part of Jake's character, that he will carry on even though he knows that he'll lose any fight.
Yeah.
And he gets knocked down physically, but not mentally or morally. They never put him off.
Yeah.
And he continues to have the swagger to insult. You know, I mean, he's already had a kicking off the farmers, and he says to one of them, "You don't know what you're talking about, you dumb okie."
Yeah.
Knowing that's going to get him into even more trouble.
Yeah.
He's got that fight, and I think that's what you admire.
Yes. Yeah.
About him, his tenacity, I suppose it is.
It's interesting because then it's the character Lou, is the cop, who says to him, "You never learn, you never learn," and I think it does sum him up in a way, because there's something about him that reminded me a little bit of Hemingway's characters somewhat. And if you've ever read the book Sun Also Rises, by any chance, you read that one?
I haven't read that one, no. But
okay, it's actually a really good book, and it's one that I argue has a hefty amount of influence on the hard-boiled genre, both in terms of the hard-boiled detective, and in one of the earliest, I think, inceptions, or what I call like the proto femme fatale, is in that book.
Right.
Well worth reading. It's one of my favorite books by Hemingway, and one of the only ones that I can actually get through happily. Because I like Hemingway, but I don't love him. I think some of his stuff is boring. But
that was my take on Hemingway, which is probably why I've not read that. But I'll look that one up.
Yes. So it basically, in this book, Sun Also Rises, there's this character named Jake Barnes. I don't know if there's a coincidence there that they're Jake and Jake. I don't know. But Jake Barnes in Sun Also Rises is he's that same guy. He has that kind of moral compass. He wants to do the right thing and tries to do the right thing, but he also doesn't learn. He doesn't learn from his mistake that he keeps making over and over and over and over. And in this book in particular, it has to do with his love and affection for a particular woman who just does not love him and will not love him for various reasons. But he doesn't learn. He's tenacious. He keeps going, but he's not learning. And I feel like there was a little bit of that sort of foolhardiness to Jake Gittes in Chinatown.
I wonder if that isn't a coincidence then, because that's two similarities.
It's very
in the name and in the character.
Yeah,
and of course I mean, it's what Chinatown is sort of about, is not learning.
Yes,
because we'll talk about this in detail later on, no doubt. But what Chinatown signifies to Jake, is that he never learns. Because he's already been told what he should do, but he doesn't do it in the past, and he doesn't do it now for the same reasons. You know, we'll explain that a bit better later on. But it's right. I mean, again, it's a perfect marriage in the screenplay of the theme of the film, one of the themes of the film, and the character explaining and demonstrating that theme.
Yes,
I mean, it's a screenwriting course's gift, this particular screenplay.
It's true. It never stops. Every scene is wonderfully building upon the plot and the tension. Like, everything is driving forward, which it's very impressive on that front. Very impressive.
It is very impressive. But Jake is certainly a man who, I mean, he's a believable man doing a believable job.
Yes. And
feeling believable emotions. He does get angry and he does get sad. He says at one point, "I'm just tired," and you see him in his pajamas in bed and he still can't sleep and all this business, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's necessarily a good man. I think he's capable of being a pretty devious man. I think he's capable of being a pretty unlikable man.
Yes.
But I think a lot of PIs are like that.
Yes.
I think that, and a lot of the tougher detectives in crime fiction are, you know, they are difficult men. Holmes is a difficult man. Rebus is a difficult man. You know,
a bit of an asshole.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think they have to be to a certain extent, because they're the ones that have got to stand up to all the stuff that's going on around them.
Yes,
and bring it down.
We have a question in the chat from I Want My TV Now. Go subscribe to his channel. He asks, how much is it? What? How much is it like Who Framed Roger Rabbit? How much is this film like Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's been so long since I've seen Roger Rabbit. I have seen it, but it's been so long that I might as well say I haven't seen it.
I've not seen it for about the same number of years. First time I saw this, about 30 years.
I mean, there's no
no immediate similarity spring to mind.
No, me neither. Me neither. He also asks, did you guys ever see the sequel? You might as well talk about it now. We'll get to this. Well, we might as well talk about this. I've never seen the sequel. I mean, I've only seen Chinatown for the first time within the last 6 months. So, no.
I have seen the sequel a few times, and I was saying to Luke before we came on air, it's a difficult film to assess because it doesn't do itself any favors by constantly trying to hark back to Chinatown. And because Chinatown is so good, it inevitably pales by comparison.
Yeah.
But that's not to say I don't think it's a bad film. I don't think it's a failure. I mean, it was widely reported as being a failure, but it had a very troubled production.
Yes.
And really only got off the ground because Nicholson had made a ton of money on Batman the previous year, and he was able to get it kickstarted. But it's not a natural sequel in many ways to me. It's different in tone. It's different in texture as well. It's different in Jake is older. He's flabbier.
Yeah, I think we said this is a legacy sequel, which is also very interesting.
Yeah, it is, because it's 16 years after Chinatown, and you feel it, sort of thing. But to compare the two, I'm just not sure it's necessarily fair, because you know, it's not as good a script. It's not as tied up as well at the end. It's not as satisfying a conclusion as the end.
Yeah,
it sags a little bit in the last act. It's about 30 minutes too long. But its message is no less powerful. Its message is that your past will never leave you alone. It will always come and get you at some point.
Yeah.
And how you deal with that is down to the sort of person you are.
Yeah.
But it does try. I mean, there are a couple of dodgy flashback sequences to Chinatown, which are a bit like, they're not as bad as this, but they're a bit like when Brody's wife sees Brody in Jaws 4. You know, they're sort of those sepia flashbacks to Chinatown, and they're not as bad as that, I hasten to add, but they're not needed, you know, and it's just not as, it doesn't flow as well. It certainly doesn't ring as true.
Yes.
But it isn't the failure that people say it is, I don't think.
That's interesting. I do need to see it. I will watch it at some point because I'm fascinated by that.
Just been released on Blu-ray, I think, only recently.
And you got it.
And I got it. Well, completion's sake.
I'm the same. Like I bought last year. I bought the Star Trek original 6-film box set in 4K. Right. I already have the Blu-ray of all 10 films, but I wanted the 4K, and now they're going to release the 4K of the Next Generation films, and I'm like, I gotta have it all in 4K.
You've got to have them.
I gotta do it. I gotta do it. You know, big Trek guy.
You've got to have them.
Sometimes I'm like, I should just make my whole channel about Star Trek, but I'm not going to do that because there's other things I like to talk about. But
Yeah,
anyway.
absolutely. So, just rounding off the two Jakes, perhaps. If people haven't seen it, I would give it a go. I would certainly give it a go, but don't expect Chinatown.
Yes.
Watch it on its own terms. That's the way to say it. If you watch it on its own terms, you will enjoy it. I think if you like PI noir films, if you watch it as with Chinatown in mind, not so much. However, you do have, if you've never seen Chinatown, you will not understand two Jakes. So you've got to watch one to understand the other.
This is the problem for me. Is I wouldn't be able to divorce the two, and this is a problem I have with a lot of stuff, where I'm like, wait, no, this is meant to connect to this, and this doesn't work, and this is silly, and what, you know, I can't. It's like the never-ending story, right? If you've ever seen the movie, I love the original movie. It's terrific, wonderful movie. Oh my gosh, every time there's something going on with StreamYard, by the way, where this happened last time. I had a huge chunk of time where I didn't see any chat, and then suddenly had a big blast of chat come through all of a sudden. So I've just now seen all of these messages that are coming through from Frank. So I'm not ignoring you, man. I just didn't see this stuff. I'm gonna have to start having it open on the side so I can see when stuff is coming through. I should have learned my lesson from Sunday, but I clearly didn't.
Well, you're like Jake then.
I know. I never learn. Damn it. But yeah. So okay. So Frank's comments here. Let's see. I heard it was supposed to be a trilogy. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. There was going to be. It was going to be called Gittis versus Gittis.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I think I'm going to get this wrong now, but it's water in the first. I think it's gas in the second. I think was it going to be oil or something in the?
Oh, interesting.
In the third, but because the two Jakes didn't do well,
sense.
They didn't get. It didn't go ahead.
Yeah.
And I think another reason why the two Jakes didn't do very well is because, as you say, legacy sequels. There was too long. The people that were going to the cinema in 1990 when it was released,
yes,
perhaps weren't born when Chinatown was, was made. So,
do you think that really matters, though? I mean, I wasn't born when it was made,
but you do have to have seen one to get the other.
So, okay. Oh, interesting point. Then, would it be the problem that in the 90s, early 90s, 1990, we're talking like VHS and all that kind of stuff? Not everybody has it. Not everybody has access to that. So they can't just go to the video store and get it and watch it or download it. And that, do you think that played a part?
May well have done. Yeah, it may well have done. So you've got that on the one hand, and you've got critics saying this is rubbish because it's not Chinatown.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of sequels that are good in their own right that aren't as good as the originals.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that's a fair criticism. I think you have to judge it. You have to judge it as a sequel, and you have to judge it as a film on its own terms.
You've sold Frank. You've sold. I want my TV now. I will watch two Jakes first, so I don't have Chinatown in my thoughts. So there you go. I'm interested to see how that works for you, Frank. I'm interested to see how that.
I'd be interested to know as well. I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate two Jakes. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in it.
Yeah,
and it does flow as a sequel in the sense that Jake in the two Jakes is obviously the man that Chinatown's Jake will have grown into after the circumstances of the climax of Chinatown.
Yeah,
he has now learned to do as little as possible, which is a key thing in Chinatown. So he is that person. He's doing cases, he's doing well, but he's keeping his head under the parapet.
Yes,
until it's forced out again. And so it does work as a sequel in that respect, and it works as a decent private eye film. It's just that after the magnificence of Chinatown, anything was going to look pretty inferior by comparison.
Well, it doesn't have to though. This is where I always have my problem. It's like it doesn't have to be inferior. I remember foolishly, I hold my hand up. I foolishly argued that point with Spectre. I loved Skyfall. I know some people don't like Skyfall, or like, for example, like Tony Khan's like, it's not a Bond film. I'm like, it's a pretty good movie. I enjoy Skyfall. It works for me as a Bond movie. But I sort of enjoyed Spectre when I first saw it. And there was all this stuff. People were like, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible. I was like, yeah, but you're comparing it after the great movie that was Skyfall. It's not going to live up to expectations because of that. And then I think I like wised up a little bit. And I'm like, no, I probably should have argued that, because there's really no reason why the sequel shouldn't be as good or comparable. Because then you think of movies like Empire Strikes Back, which is much better than Star Wars, or you think of X-Men 2. X-Men 2 is by far my all-time favorite comic book movie and blows X-Men 1 out of the water.
Yeah.
It is a great sequel.
And arguably, you have The Dark Knight being better than Batman Begins, although
I disagree.
I disagree. I think Batman Begins is far better.
Yeah.
But
totally.
People say that as general. And
yeah.
I mean, the same does apply to. It is a good film in its own right. My point was, a lot of people dismissed it because it wasn't as good as Chinatown.
Yes.
My point, my view is that that's an unfair comparison to make.
Yeah.
Really, because it's actually trying to do quite a different thing.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's set in 1948. It's not trying to be a 1930s Private Eye, for example. It's not about. Don't want to give the plot away. It's not really that sort of. Private Eye starts on something little and goes into something major.
Yes.
It's not really that, and its message, like I say, is quite different to Chinatown, but is no less powerful for it. I think the problems with it are there were problems with the screenplay. Nicholson wanted rewrites. He got the rewrites. Town almost walked out on it. So there was a lot of backbiting going on behind the scenes, which never helps.
No.
Whereas Chinatown's pace is faultless.
Yes.
The Two Jakes does, towards the third act starting, you start to sort of look at the cast list and say, oh, I didn't realise it was him. And that's because it's too long. That's not a story problem. It's because there are some scenes that needed cutting and that could have been cut.
Yes.
So, I suppose that the flaws with it are the editing and the screenplay.
Yeah.
Which to me will sort of, the screenplay should have been edited before the film itself was edited.
Yeah. Frank also agrees Batman Begins is the superior film. It is. It's the best of the trilogy.
It is, by far.
And Batman The Dark Knight Rises doesn't exist in my book. My headcanon, that film doesn't exist. But we're not here to talk about.
That's like me and Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, no, recently I had a really fun show with Jonathan Whitelaw, which is on my channel archived. Go watch it. One of his favorite movies was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah.
Wonderful, brilliant film. Love that film. And I rewatched it in prep and I was just like, yeah, I cannot justify accepting Crystal Skull into the canon. I can't do it. I would accept the Young Adventures of Indiana Jones before I would accept that.
Yeah, me too. The Riding Off into the Sunset is a perfect ending.
Yes, and I don't know. I don't know about this new one. There's a lot that I don't like. There's a lot that doesn't have me excited. One of those being so much CGI. Indiana Jones was great being set in real places, doing real things. I don't care if he's being dragged at 10 miles an hour on a car and that you can tell that is slowly driving on the, I don't care. It was real. It was real. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, getting off oh my gosh. Frank is asking, should we do a trailer breakdown? I think he means him and I. Yes, we should. That would be hilarious. Frank and I did it. I was on Frank's show last week. On I Want My TV Now, and we did a breakdown of the Flash trailer. And
I saw it.
Did you?
Brilliant. It was brilliant.
Okay, good. Oh, that was good. For anyone who's listening and didn't watch, go watch that video because it was a lot of fun. I went in. I'm not excited about the Flash, but then as we broke the trailer down and we put the story together, I was like, oh, that story sounds kind of fun. It's just a shame that Ezra Miller is an absolute bell end.
Yeah,
Uh, and leave it at that.
yeah, leave that there.
Yes, but I'll happily do a trailer breakdown. That would be fun. Okay, so back to Chinatown.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Evelyn Cross or Evelyn Mulray. What do you make of her as a femme fatale?
Well, is she or isn't she? I think she starts off as one. I think, or she starts off as an approximation of one. But I think she ends up as something quite different. I think she ends up as quite the opposite. Really, to me, she's the innocent in the whole film. She starts off as, I mean, she's lying to him. She's playing him. She certainly looks like a femme fatale. I mean, the background picture to this show is one of the best posters of Chinatown that I think there is. It's fantastic, and she looks absolutely perfect for a femme fatale. And when you first watch it, you know exactly what you think. You know exactly what you're going to get. Perfect. She's ideal, but she isn't necessarily, she isn't what she appears to be. And when you've peeled back the layers of who she is and why she's acting the way she is, I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
So I think she is and she isn't. I think she starts off as being one, but and ends up being the innocent victim in it all, and through no fault of her own.
Yes.
The real villain is absolutely
someone
else.
Let's not spoil it. Let's not spoil it just yet. We'll get there.
I'll just leave it as someone else.
Someone else. Some other mother.
But yeah, she. So that's my take on it, and everything she does, every lie she tells, has a reason for it, and it's a noble reason, and that's not really femme fatale. I mean, at the end of your average film noir, the femme fatale is either dead or has killed everybody.
Yes.
Well, again, not the typical end. Not the typical end for Evelyn Mulray.
Yeah. I tell you what, it was fascinating to me because when I look at her, it's fun that first conversation that Jake Gittes has with Noah Cross, who is her father. He eventually learns is her father. He labels her, unstable, impulsive, which are all those sort of terms that are kind of thrown on the femme fatale, but they're also this sort of terminology and fear that was pushed upon women at that time anyway, because like the 1920s you have the new woman, and by the 1930s she's this individual is gaining more prominence, she's got more agency, not as much as now, but it's starting to happen, and there is a sort of threat of that. I remember there's a Dashiell Hammett short story called I can't remember what it's called, but one of the tagline by the publisher was that in this story you're going to meet the new woman. She's dangerous. She's flashy. She's which is quite fascinating, and that is clearly what's going on here. Noah Cross is putting this sort of negative terminology on her because of various reasons, but it's this sort of masculine fear of what men being afraid of women, basically, and what they can do or not do, and what their position in society should or shouldn't be. Which again is interesting because that's also a theme to some degree in Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, which I do feel had some sort of influence on this.
That is well worth a bit of research to find out if it has. I'd be fascinated to know if it has, because it's starting to sound more and more as if it has happened.
It's a shame I only thought of it now, not while I was writing my research paper, because I could have included it. God damn it!
We could have included it. I could have read it for a start. So
yeah.
But I agree, and certainly in that scene with Cross, he is painting her as something she's not, for reasons that become clear.
Yes.
But again, it's an example of Jake being sort of sidelined, and I don't mean sidelined, I mean sidetracked, and being taken off the scent.
Yeah.
And thrown into a different direction that he really shouldn't go, because he already he knows the truth about her.
Yeah.
Or he suspects he does.
Yeah.
He knows what she's like, because he's got to know her. So when Cross comes and says that she's something else, Jake doesn't stand up against that immediately. He goes then through a period of time of not trusting her at all.
Yes.
And again, this is harking back to the theme of it. He sees things that he misinterprets. He sees the argument with one of the other female characters that he misinterprets.
Yes.
He sees her with it might be with her father, and he misinterprets that, and that's when he starts to follow her.
Yeah.
And what he sees then is he misinterprets yet again. All the time he's misinterpreting what's being told, but she can't. That's when she starts to become the innocent to me.
Yes,
because he then starts to mistreat her in the same way that other people have mistreated her in the past.
Yes,
and she's doing it for the best of. She's telling him the truth whilst also appearing to be lying to him.
Yes. And we'll definitely get to that scene now. We'll be more explicit in that scene in just a bit. But it's interesting because even the police think she is the suspect. They think, because her husband eventually is murdered, they think that she is the killer, and they're going after her. And even Jake thinks that she might have done it, and it becomes complicated. It becomes very Maltese Falcon-esque, where is it Bridget O'Shaughnessy, or is it was she bad or was she not? Is Mrs. Mulwray bad or is she not? And so I found that quite interesting. The other thing that was interesting to me, though, is when obviously not obvious, but like in most hard-boiled stories, the detective ends up banging the femme fatale at some point, or comes close, and obviously her and Jake do the deed. And for this one moment, you get a sense that all of their sort of walls start to come down for a minute, right?
Yeah.
But then, of course,
it's prefaced by he's been beaten up by the farmers.
Yes.
And he's got into a scuffle at the old folks' home.
Yes.
And she saves him. Again, you can see Roman Polanski walking towards it. God knows what he's going to do that time. And his nose is starting to bleed again. And there's a really tender bit in the bathroom where she's tending to his nose, and that's when he notices she's got something not right with her eye.
Yes.
Which is paid off in the very last scene.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Anyway, and it's real that love scene comes after quite a believable tenderness.
Yes.
Where you're right, the barriers then come down, and too often the private eye jumps into bed with a femme fatale, after they've had a couple of shots.
Yes.
This is quite it's a genuine love story. I think it's a genuine element of the love story in the lead up to that bit.
It builds nicely. It's not until I think you're beginning the second hour of the movie.
No, because up until then they've been dancing around each other.
Yes,
and he's clearly not trusting her. And then after the restaurant scene, there's that brilliant speech he has when he tells her that Hollis was murdered, and he says, "It's all fine by me, but I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like breathing through it."
Yeah,
and then he says to her, almost
God
as if
damn, there lost my nose.
yeah, and he's got the plaster down that side. But he then says, as if this is worse than losing his nose, he says to her, "And I still think you're hiding something." And
yes.
after that, she's dancing around him. She drops the lawsuit, then she hires him, and all the time she's pulling him in one direction or the other until she realizes that he's onto something.
Yes.
And she saves him at the old folks home, and then you get the bit in the bathroom, and so it's a natural. For the first hour and I don't know quarter of the film, he's it's brilliant. They've been at odds with each other.
Yes.
And she's been painted as something not to be trusted.
Yes.
And then her entire story is turned on its head.
Yes, and that trust, that distrust continues after the love scene, which is fascinating because she gets a phone call and there's something wrong, and she begs Jake to just stay here. I'll come back, stay in bed. I'll be back, stay in bed.
Yeah.
And of course he follows her, and what he discovers, or what he thinks he's discovered, is that he thinks that Mrs. Mulray has kidnapped her husband's or ex-husband's now lover, the girl that we had seen him with earlier in the movie. And before we do the big reveal, what's interesting is after that love scene, and the next time he doesn't ever call Mrs. Mulray Evelyn. He only ever calls her Mrs. Mulray.
He does
even
absolutely.
after banging her.
And I'll tell you why I think that is. I think there's an element of he feels a sense of betrayal because the barriers have come down. They're naked in bed, metaphorically and physically.
Yeah.
And he starts to give an inkling to what happened in Chinatown.
Yes. Yes.
And I get this every time I watch it. I get the sense that apart from Walsh and
the other
fellow whose name I can't remember now, and Lou Escobar, I don't think anybody really knows, apart from those select few, what really happened.
Yeah.
And he tells her just enough to tell us. So when she then legs it and lies to him, I think he feels not only that he's got to follow her as a detective, but also there's a massive betrayal to him because he's opened up too far. So there's a mixture of regret and betrayal about it.
Yes.
So that it's by never calling her Evelyn again, it's his way of saying, I'm never trusting you again.
Yes.
We're back to being Mr. Gittis and Mrs. Mulray now. For me.
Yes.
That's it. That's over. It's done.
Yes.
I think that's pretty clear.
Yes. Oh, I agree. It's fascinating to me. I when I saw that, when that scene kind of happened, and I'm like, I was like, oh, that's so cold, and I felt bad. I felt really bad for Mrs. Mulray, for Evelyn. I was like, oh, this is tough because I don't really think she necessarily deserves what is happening right now. But so it's interesting. So he follows Evelyn to this house. He finds that she's been holding someone hostage, or we think it is, but what we find out. Say again.
He thinks she's holding him hostage.
Yes.
Again, he's misinterpreting it, but he draws a conclusion.
Yes.
And acts on it.
Yes, and then after some conversation, she's gonna go somewhere, and he's going to meet her later, but he calls the cops and says, hey, she's over here, she's with the cops, she's over here, tells the cops where to go and catch her. Again, very much like the Maltese Falcon, where he calls the cops on Bridget O'Shaughnessy, which is quite interesting. And then you get to this moment where he goes back to Evelyn, he goes back to Mrs. Mulray, and they have the big reveal that changes everything. And there's this, it's such a horrible scene, but I mean, it's well done. It's a very good scene, but it's so sad and it's so wrecking, I think, because he's trying to find out basically who this girl is, and she's saying that it's her daughter, and he's like, "You never had it," or something. Like, "You never had a daughter," or something along those lines. Do you remember what it was?
He said all that. He says,
"Yeah,
you don't have a daughter."
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So he said, "Yeah, you've never had a daughter." And then he starts smacking her every time she says, "Oh, it's my daughter." And then she says, "No, it's my sister." And then he slaps her, and they just back and forth going.
Yeah, and what's clever about it is that it takes us almost the same amount of time as it takes Jake in real time to understand exactly what she's saying, because it does sound like a lie. She's my sister, slap. She's my daughter, slap. She's my sister, slap. But she can't be both. You're saying to yourself, she can't be both. And then he gets it. Yeah. Jake gets it. We get it.
Yeah.
And suddenly she's a mess. And suddenly she is not a femme fatale.
Yes. Then you think back and you think about that first meeting with one of those early meetings, not the first one of the early meetings, when she stumbles when she says my father.
Yes.
And then you get that you everything clicks when that from that first meeting with Mr. Cross, where he's like,
"That's right.
I want to find the girl. I need you to find the girl."
Keep saying the girl. Keep saying the girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a side note, the whole I can only hear him as the lawgiver from Planet of the Apes. I think he's the lawgiver in the fifth Planet of the Apes movie. I think at the end.
Yeah. He's also a pretty bad Professor Moriarty against Roger Moore's Sherlock Holmes.
Oh my God, was he in the Sherlock Holmes in New York?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Oh gosh,
taking the paycheck and running.
Yeah, don't blame him. But Frank got it in the chat. Yes,
he only ever calls it just find the girl, Mr. Gitz.
That's it.
Find the girl.
Find the girl.
And
yes, that's it. Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I should do a Planet of the Apes.
That's the one. Yeah,
chat sometime. I love
it. And it's then that you realize that, because there's an earlier scene when he's talking about Noah Cross and he's talking about Hollis Mulray being partners.
Yeah.
And she starts to light a cigarette.
Yes.
And he says, "You've already got one going."
Mm.
And that's
big clues. Big clues the stupid investigator ain't getting.
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't ask her why. Doesn't ask her why she's like in such a state.
Yes.
So there's that, and then when the slapping scene takes place, you think, well, that's why she doesn't like talking about her dad. Then, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And then when she gives him when she gives him the check, and she's hired him, it's in an envelope, and it's got a monogrammed C on it.
Yes.
You might not remember, but when go back and watch it again, and you see it, it's not hidden from you.
Yeah.
You don't notice it when you're watching, but when you go back and watch it as many times as I have,
yes,
and you think then, why does he not say this monogrammed envelope is initialed with a C? Because then he should know that her name was Cross. Doesn't ask
he's like, wait a minute, that's your father?
Yeah, he doesn't.
Oh
ask
my God, I didn't realize.
He doesn't assume that might be a maiden name, and he's already investigating a man called Cross.
No. Yeah.
It's all those things just come crashing together.
Yes, this is where that big moment of like no one is seeing properly. He is not seeing properly. Everything
is not seeing properly. Yeah,
he never learns. He never learns.
He never learns.
Come on,
he never learns. He never interprets what he's meant to interpret.
Yes.
But I mean that could make him sound like a dreadful detective, but it's because we have to remember that he's already said divorce cases are his forte, his métier. Yeah. He's out of his
far from that.
Yeah, it's an awful phrase, but he's out of his comfort zone.
He is.
So he doesn't do this all the time. He's not looking for the same bits of evidence, because his normal job is following blokes around and taking pictures in the park.
Yes.
This is something else. He's not trained for this.
Yes.
But
Yes.
and which is a brilliant bit of characterization and character writing on the screenplay's part. It's incredible.
Yes.
It really is incredible.
Speaking of Noah Cross, Frank says he'll always be the reporter from Tentacles, the 1977 film. I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't think I've ever seen that. So
I don't think I've seen Tentacles.
Donnie, he's out of his element.
Well,
I don't get that reference either. Tell me.
It's definitely true about Jay.
Yes. Noah Cross is again fascinating because he is, as a character, he is just a force of nature, isn't he? And in many ways in one. I mean, he wants to control the water. He wants to control the life, right? He wants to build this empire. Oh, The Big Lebowski. That's from it's been ages since I've seen The Big Lebowski, which is a very good film. He wants to build this empire, and the most grotesque thing is why does he want the girl?
Yeah, wow, well, quite. Why does he?
I mean, it's very clear. Something that I read, which is very interesting, and this was in this particular article, was asking, what is the parentage of Evelyn? Because there are a lot of he has like a bunch of is it Chinese staff, Japanese staff, or Chinese?
It's Chinese staff.
Chinese staff. That's right. That's right. It's got the guy who's in Blade Runner. It's got the actor who's like 1,000 years old now.
Yeah.
The guy who does the eyes in Blade Runner. Anyway, and so this article raised an interesting point, saying, who is Evelyn's mother? Is it possible that Evelyn's mother was one of Cross's servants that we kind of did the deed with, got what he wanted, and disposed of? Because we never hear anything about her mother. Her mother is never mentioned. Nothing.
No.
Nothing. Yes, James Hong. That's it. Thank you.
Hong.
And yes, that guy is in everything. He literally is in everything. Literally.
But you're right. We don't hear anything about Evelyn's mother.
And so they were.
If that theory is right, it wouldn't surprise me if.
Yes. So that could be an interesting thing, and so therefore it's did he see Evelyn as his daughter? Probably not. He clearly didn't. He just, it's this kind of sick and twisted thing where it's like he wants to reproduce himself, like from himself, from his creation. You know what I mean? It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, he wants to own and by the end of the film, he does own everything.
Yes.
He wins. He's won.
Yes. We'll get to that. We'll go into more detail about that in a minute. Let's move to Chinatown.
Just one more before we do that. Yeah. One more thing, because it goes back to what you were saying about what does he want.
Yes.
Because Jake asks him point blank in a brilliant speech when he says, I'm not going to get this word perfect, but he says, "How much better can you eat? How much more can you buy?
Yeah.
How many more cars can you make?" He lists a whole load of stuff.
Yeah.
And the answer to all those questions really is nothing more. But I want more. And that is that's not a human reaction. That's not a normal human reaction. That shows Cross being, just like you say, an absolute monster. I think he features regularly in polls of the top X number of movie.
I mean, he should.
But I do wonder if she is. He's not. I do wonder if it is.
Yeah, her mom was one of his servants.
I mean, I don't know. It's never. Never.
We know nothing. She probably was. She was some discarded servant, which just makes the whole situation even worse. Makes him even more disgusting.
Because if it is that, it certainly raises questions about why he wants Catherine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the reason is clear. I do think. The very first time I watched the movie before I read this particular article, which I only read a couple of days ago, was that, oh my God, he's got the girl. What is he gonna? He's gonna. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's going to do. I think it's quite.
And that nicely does sort of bring us into before I interrupted you.
Yeah.
What Chinatown means.
Yes. What does it
What
mean?
it
What
is.
does Chinatown mean? Because the whole time, what's really fun about this film is the whole time, and this is what was interesting for me when I very first watched it, is it's called Chinatown. You sort of expect the movie's going to take place in Chinatown,
Yeah.
and it doesn't.
No.
But everyone is mentioning Chinatown. It's like this sort of mysterious, mythical place, right?
Yeah.
Where
I
bad
think it's
things
mentioned
happen.
8 or 9 times in the film.
Yeah.
By various people.
Yes.
But a bit of trivia.
Mm.
The screenplay came about because Robert Towne was talking to a policeman who had served in Chinatown.
Mm.
And he said, well, what did you do there? And the policeman replied, as little as possible, which is exactly what Jake said.
Yeah.
So that is the kernel of truth that this film is built. So, of course, Towne then says that he went away and thought, well, why did he do as little as possible?
Yeah.
And that really is the sort of the starting block of the film.
Yeah.
In terms of how it came to be created.
Yeah.
But in terms of the story, I mean, I think it's a metaphor for almost everything in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the place that Jake says something like he was told by a policeman above him to do as little as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And Evelyn says, this is what I was saying before about she's breaking down his barriers.
Mm-hmm.
She says, well, that's strange advice to give to a policeman. And he says, it's because you never know what's going on.
Yeah.
So if you never know what's going on, the best thing to do is as little as possible.
Yeah.
Because you can't understand the effects of your actions.
Yeah.
That is why it's called Chinatown to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
If Jake had followed his own advice and done as little as possible in the Mulray case, he wouldn't be where he ends up.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't be. Evelyn wouldn't be. I mean, the thing is, two people probably would still be alive and safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is the bittersweetness of it all, because that's essentially what happens is everything descends upon Chinatown. And in this one moment where Jake is trying to do the right thing, he's out of his depth, he's trying to get Evelyn out of town with her daughter, with her sister. He's trying to do the right thing now, realizing that he's effed up.
Yeah.
And then everyone descends. The police descend. Noah descends. It all descends on this moment. And there's this tense stalemate where, she tries to get away. Evelyn tries to get away. And due to Jake making a move, a gun goes off and Evelyn is gone. And there's just that creepy moment in which Cross puts his arm around the girl and takes the girl and goes away
and shields her, and it just takes her away. Yeah, and there's that lovely scene where you just hear the car horn, and you know what's happening without you hear the gunshot on the car horn.
Yeah.
But it goes back to something he said earlier. He tells Evelyn that he tried to protect somebody and something bad happened.
Yeah. And again,
so this is, I think Chinatown, the point of Chinatown, the metaphor of Chinatown is you never learn from your mistakes. First of all, Jake never
learns.
Jake never learns. Don't learn from your mistakes, and your destiny is what it is.
Yes.
Which ties in nicely with what I was saying about the two Jakes. That message is your past will always come back and get you. So there is a thematic link there. The Chinatown message is you'll never escape what you're destined to do.
Yeah.
And the two Jakes follows it by saying, and that will always come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of synchronicity there.
Yes. I kind of view Chinatown as it's like, is it a bad place or someone's, or is it bad luck, or is it that they are like Jake and they just can't read the bloody room, and that's why they have bad luck?
I think it's all of it. I think it's all of those.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the famous last line. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Yeah.
And even here, even in the last frames of the film, while she's saying it's China, but he has no conception and no understanding of what is taking place around him. He
Yeah.
doesn't. Jake does now. Finally, Jake does understand, and you can see it in his eyes.
Yeah.
But his two associates have got no idea. They just say, it's Chinatown. Shit happens.
Yep.
It's happening. It's the same as it was however many years ago it was. That's to them, it's that superficial. To Jake,
Yes.
it's deeper. To Jake, it is these sort of things, these bad things don't happen in Chinatown.
Yes.
None of this badness took place in Chinatown. It was in the rich part of LA.
Yeah.
So Chinatown really is what happens in Chinatown happens in the world.
Yes.
And Jake's worldview has just been blown apart.
Yes. Yes.
By the gunshots in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And if that isn't poetic, I don't know. It's almost sort of biblical in theme.
Yes.
I don't know what it is. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes.
But that's what Chinatown is to me. It's a symbol and a metaphor for all the badness in the world.
Yeah.
And also that badness can happen anywhere.
Anywhere. I agree totally. Frank in the chat. Oh, go on.
Well, just that you can't escape it.
Yeah. No.
Unless the most beautiful irony of all, unless you do as little as possible.
Yes, it's true. It's true. It's true. I was going to make a joke and say, unless you turn to Jesus. I don't know why that came to my mind, but it just sounded funny to me.
Sort of undermines the point.
It does a bit. Anyway, yeah, Frank mentions in the chat, he says that I need to see this. I need to actually see this. I know everything through pop culture, stroke AFI, stroke movie articles, osmosis. I mean, there's a lot of Chinatown that I was aware of visually because of that. But yeah, putting it all together was great. Some interesting bits as we kind of round off the discussion. Then is the plot or the script. So it was written by Robert Towne, and it was tightened by Roman Polanski. And the interesting thing is, Towne wanted the film to be a happy ending. He wanted Evelyn and Geddes to ride off into the sunset, to go to Mexico together and get away from it all.
Yeah.
But Polanski said, no, I want it to be an unmitigated tragedy.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting to me because for those who don't know, his wife was Sharon Tate. And if you don't know who Sharon Tate is, she was involved with the Manson murders, the Manson family, Charles Manson back in the 70s. There's the late 60s, 70s, that period there, that kind of end of 60s, early 70s. And she was murdered, right? So I'm curious how much that quite recent incident in his life, Polanski's life, influence a script to make that change, particularly with Evelyn. Did he make that change because he didn't want this happy ending for this couple? He didn't have a happy ending. Was he putting himself into it or trying to make commentary about something in his life? What do you think?
I think absolutely he was. There's two things about the change. Three things. First of all, I think Polanski was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the reason I think he was absolutely right is that if Jake isn't left stranded, he learns nothing.
Yes.
He doesn't.
Finally, he learns.
Finally, he learns. So if he doesn't learn now, he's never going to learn.
Yeah.
And he has to have this.
Well,
he has to have his eyes open.
It's a maybe he learned, and in him turning around and looking is the did he really learn or not? Because this is again this is reminds me of The Sun Also Rises. At the end of that book, the woman who has been teasing and manipulating Jake Barnes, her name is Lady Brett Ashley. She is in distress, and Jake comes to her rescue, and while they're sitting in the car, she's like, "Oh, we could have been so great together." And he's like, "It's pretty to think so," which he acknowledges. That's him acknowledging that it's kind of a fool's hope. It's not it's a fantasy. But at the same time, he has gone to her rescue. He hasn't learned. He's turned to look back, just like Jake has done here. He's turned to look back. God damn it! This could have been my whole PhD.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when the final tragedy has occurred, Jake whispers something very, very softly, and what he said, sometimes you can't, it's not easy to catch, but what he says is as little as possible.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think when he's looking back, then it's partly we could have been happy.
Yeah, it's pretty to think.
It's partly I've caused this.
Yeah,
and it's partly I should have done as little as possible. I should have listened, done what I was told. And when you do watch the two Jakes, there is, for the period of time that between the two films, the two stories, not necessarily the two films, two stories. As I say, he's in quite a good place. He's sort of jogging along, and he's on reasonable terms with the cops. He's doing cases. Yeah. He's made a bit of money, and it strikes me that in the intervening period, he's walked away from the last scene of Chinatown and said, "Never again."
Yeah, yeah.
So he has learned. I think he has learned.
Yeah.
But the ending is deliberately ambiguous as to whether he's learned or not. It's when the two Jakes comes along that you can sort of say definitely, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes.
But in terms of Polanski and his tragedies, I think it's got to be the case that he did it for some sort of catharsis.
Yeah.
If I've suffered, Jake can suffer.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking a great number of years in the big scheme of things between the two events.
No.
And he wouldn't be the first person to do it. I mean, Ian Rankin famously says that in Black and Blue, he made Rebus a punching bag because his own life was going through some difficult times.
I get it.
He takes it out on Rebus.
Yeah.
And I think The Long Goodbye is definitely, even if he wouldn't admit it himself, Chandler trying to come to terms with his own alcoholism.
Possibly. There's definitely a bit of catharsis going on in Chandler's books, whether that's that.
Yeah, I've long thought, because the number of people who are either drinking or drunk, and there are pages and pages in Long Goodbye of what it means to be a drunk.
Yeah,
and his wife had just, I think Cassie had just died while he was writing it, or dies while he's writing it.
Yeah.
So I think it's not above writers, actors, or directors, or any other sort of artistic person to take out their own angst, frustration, sadness on the art they're making. So I would be amazed if it came out that Polanski hadn't changed the ending for that reason.
Yeah, what's interesting,
as well as the artistic reason of it, the film doesn't mean anything if Jake goes off into the sunset with Evelyn and Catherine as a happy family. The film doesn't mean anything then.
Yeah. There's an interesting quote that Frank's put in the chat that says, if Chinatown, from Polanski, saying that if Chinatown was to be special, not just another thriller where the good guys triumph in the final reel, Evelyn had to die. It's interesting because, again, really, he's not doing anything outrageously new. I mean, The Big Sleep, Vivian Regan, she gets away. Carmen gets away. The Maltese Falcon, Bridget O'Shaughnessy gets arrested, but it's not a happy ending for Sam Spade. I mean, there's that ending where Eve comes. Is Evie or Eve? His partner's Miles, his partner's wife, who he was having an affair with. I can't remember her name. I think it's Eve or something like that. She comes back at the very, very end. The secretary comes in and says, "Oh, hey, Spade, she's out here for you." And he's like, and he has like a chill. He's like, "Oh shit," So it's these sad endings are very typical of the hard boiled stories, and I think.
They are.
I do think Polanski changing the ending has to do with what happened, but I think he's also probably clocked that actually all these hard-boiled stories that we're imitating have sour endings, and the guy doesn't get the girl. So I'm going to do that.
They rarely do. I mean, there's a brilliant one of Chandler's great last lines is, I think is it The High Window, when he says something about it was as if I'd written a poem and it was very good, but I couldn't remember it.
Yes.
Something like that, you know.
Yes.
And that feeling of I've just had something great, but I can't recapture it.
Yes.
You know, and so it's nothing new.
No.
But it's done very well in this film.
I think
to have had them get together would have been a huge mistake.
Would have been lame. Yeah.
It would have been a huge mistake. It would have undermined everything that had gone before, really.
Yeah. And we're right back to where we started. We're right back at the very beginning of the movie. We're introduced to the movie, to this world with a broken, destroyed relationship of an abusive relationship. And where do we end? With another broken relationship, the Noah Cross walking away with the girl, undoubtedly going to go and abuse her in the very near future.
Absolutely.
It's the parallels between the end. It's like this: we end right where we began, sort of, and just utter someone's devastation.
And again, that is absolutely right. We start with infidelity, and we end with
incest.
The worst example of it.
Yeah.
But what we also get is, because the point I made at the beginning, that photograph of Curly's wife and her lover is the only time that a photograph tells the truth.
Yeah.
That's Jake with the truth.
Yeah.
The end of the film is Jake with his own realization of a bigger truth.
Yeah.
So you start with infidelity and an honest picture of it. You end with an even worse version of infidelity and corruption and all the rest of it. Yeah. And the darker truth behind that. I mean, that, like I say, there's a PhD course waiting to happen on this film.
I know.
Oh my God. That is almost perfect screenwriting. You know, it
is
speechless.
I know. It is genuinely terrific movie. It is. The writing is very, very sharp. The way the characters are developed, the way they react is very, very good. There are a few films who accomplish what this film accomplishes.
Absolutely.
I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you've not seen it, don't waste any time. You need to go see it. I waited too long. Learn from my mistake.
Don't be Jake Gittes. Watch Chinatown. Learn. I mean, if anybody that sees you've only got to look at my Twitter handle to know how much I love this film, because my banner is Jake with his nose cut, and the poster is my.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course. Your picture is the poster. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking of your handle. I was like, it's Holmes. It's Sherlock Holmes. But then
the pictures.
The picture. Yes. And so go follow Mathew at Holmes Booth on Twitter.
Yeah, please do. It is. Luke's right. If you've not seen this film, it's my favorite film of all time, I think, and it certainly crops up all the time in top 10, 20 films of all time, whatever it might be. Yeah. And it is one of the best. You know, it is one of the best.
I mean, because it
works on almost every level. It works as a pastiche of film noir. Although, funnily enough, film noir is always shot in the dark and in the rain, and this is brilliant sunshine and very few scenes in the dark, which is another great touch.
Yes.
It works great as a pastiche. It works great as a detective story in its own right. Fabulous performances. I wanted to mention Faye Dunaway when we were talking about Evelyn Mulray, because she's phenomenal in this film.
She is.
But as a multi-layered structure of a story and of a screenplay that keeps its theme going through character and plot, it's a masterpiece.
Yes, we've been successful because Frank's saying I'm adding it to the list. I seriously will probably purchase it tonight.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's good. That's the best bit of feedback you can have, because you won't be disappointed.
I don't think you will. I think you'll like it. It is a genuinely very good film, and like I said, I watched and I was sort of mad at myself for waiting so long to see it, because it was such a good movie. It's just so good.
And Nicholson's I would argue almost at his the first peak of his career.
Yes.
I think he got an award for Chinatown. He accepted it on the set of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So
yes,
he's come from sort of 5 easy pieces and
yes,
onto this, then onto Cuckoo's Nest, then onto The Shining. I mean, that's a pretty good run.
Yes, yeah, I agree that's he is hitting his stride at this point for sure. And the last thing I was going to say is also the music is terrific. Jerry Goldsmith, famous for Star Trek the Motion Picture, Alien, L.A. Confidential, and many
The
others.
Omen.
The Omen. The main theme is terrific. If you haven't
listened
to it,
is tricky. And again, it's a bit of a pastiche of films of that period, but it does something quite contemporary with it, contemporary for the time.
Yeah. I was thinking as I was listening to it, it's on Spotify, so I was listening to it today a little bit, and I was thinking how getting the music, Frank, what's Star Trek? What's Star Trek? This is Star Trek, Captain Kirk, right on my desk, staring at me while I work.
I'm going to go on Google later and see if there's a Jake Gittes figure like that.
Oh, that would be fun. That would be fun.
Because if there's not, there should be.
There should be. But what I was thinking as I was listening to the score is that it's so easy for some of these detective films to generate a sort of try hard or wannabe noir score where it just sort of imitates what you think you need to hear. And I think I sort of felt that way a little bit with Poodle Springs.
Yeah.
The music wasn't great. It was kind of typical. You kind of expected what was coming, but there was such. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith is a terrific composer, and there was so much life. It adds. It's like Lord of the Rings. The music is another character.
Yeah,
that adds something to it. And this,
you're right. There's some. There's a tendency to over saxophone.
Yes.
Soundtracks like this.
Yes. And Jake's theme, there's a theme called J.J. Geddes. Geddes. And it's just it begins with this kind of sporadic tapping of the piano keys, that ding, 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 and then some sort of strumming. But then it's quite eerie because it's going from like sharp to flat and it's kind of creepy and horror-ish almost. And it's just like, oh, it is good stuff.
Yeah. Because I've got it on Spotify, the soundtrack, and there's a couple of tracks where you get that sort of piano sort of, and it is like a horror thing. It's just sort of there's a slash of piano notes, in the middle of strings, and it's quite disconcerting, and it's perfect. It's perfect. I love this film. It's one of my absolute favorites, if not my favorite.
It is a terrific film. Terrific. It's aged perfectly. I mean, you watch it and it's not, you don't watch it like, ugh. You watch it like, that's a damn good film.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, being set in the past, I always think helps to stop things being dated, but it's not shot or scored or acted in a way that smells and screams the 1970s.
It doesn't at all, which is really good.
It's brilliant. It's amazing.
Yeah. Highly recommend
it. A film that really is a film that repeated viewings will always repay you. You know,
yes.
It's not one to watch and then say, "Well, I've seen that now." There's always something else that you find in it.
The last thing I'll say on that is that kind of goes back to the tragedy again. One of these articles that I was reading was speaking about Polanski and tragedy, and him saying that something along the lines of like, you don't really forget tragedies, and again, when I thought about things like The Big Sleep, Maltese Falcon, and even The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, they are all tragedies ultimately, you know, and it's, you are so invested in the characters because you're interested in how they respond to trying so hard to win but losing, and failing in some way, and I think those stories stick with you, you know, quite a lot, for various reasons. I mean, a lot of Shakespeare's tragedy, isn't it? And you know,
absolutely,
people are still talking about that guy.
And some things don't change. I mean, the rich will always try and get richer.
Yes.
There will always be a deal to be done.
Yeah.
I think it might even be in Poodle Springs, I think, where he says no dollar is clean.
Yes.
But the human emotions in this film, as in all the great tragedies, and Shakespeare is a good example.
Yes.
They're things that we still feel today. For all our modern trappings, they're still you still feel envy, loathing, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
They're universal themes. So
totally.
if you're tackling those things, you're likely not to date as as much.
Yeah.
And when you do it in this amount of style, which I want to mention the costumes as well.
Oh yeah, perfect.
And the way it's lit, because the period detail is fabulous. It's fabulous.
It is.
The whole thing is fabulous.
It is.
I don't know what
visually stunning.
I don't know if it won any, but
yeah, I
I'd like to know
it.
what Oscars it won.
Say again.
I'd like to know what Oscars it won, if any.
I'll tell you what, a really quick look. Let's see how many.
You probably didn't win any now. I said that.
I know, right? Did Chinatown win? At the 47th Academy Awards, it was nominated for 11 Oscars, with Town winning Best Screenplay.
Well,
so at least it's won that. That's the first thing that's come up on Google. I'm assuming that's all they won. Best Screenplay, as Frank says.
That's well deserved.
In the chat, I think so. Yeah,
definitely. 11 nominations isn't bad for what a lot of people might have thought was just a private eye film.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Mathew, this was good fun. I'm glad we sat down and talked Chinatown.
Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to spout about one of my favorite films of all time.
You're welcome. I like having you on. We'll bring you back for another chat. Maybe we'll watch Two Jakes at some point and do that. But there's also other things to bring you back on and chat about.
Yeah, love to. Anytime, love to.
Good. I'm back next week for those listening who want to come back and hear me talk or other people talk. Next week I have Ian Rankin on the show, which is going to be pretty cool. If you don't know who he is, where have you been? Ian Rankin is a best-selling author of the John Rebus books, police procedural books set in Edinburgh, one of my favorite cities in the world. We're coming back next week to chat about some of his favorite books, some of his favorite music, a little bit about crime writing. It's going to be a lot of fun. So be there or be square. And
could I be cheeky? You can ask people to check out my my books.
Of course.
So I've got a book out at the minute called A Talent for Murder, which is a golden age type murder mystery. The sequel is out this month called The Dangers of This Night, and I'm in talks for a private eye novel, funnily enough.
Nice.
Called The House of Skulls. So I will keep you posted on that.
Do.
But for now, please check out the Everett Carr Mysteries, A Talent for Murder, and The Dangers of This Night, now available for pre-order.
There you go.
Talent for Murder you can buy right away.
There you go. And there will be a link in the description to Mathew's Amazon link, so you can go and get the books there.
Much appreciated. Thank you all, and thank you.
You're welcome. Frank does mention that that Chinatown lost to Godfather 2. That'd be must have been a hard summer.
Yeah, it must have been.
Not a chance, as he says. But yeah. Anyway, come back next week. Got Ian Rankin. Week after that, I'm chatting The Mandalorian with Jonathan Whitelaw. Week after that, I would have probably submitted my PhD, so I got a lot of work to do. But week after that, the third week, I'm bringing on Nicholas Meyer, the director of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, director of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the writer of The 7% Solution, many other Sherlock Holmes books, including the brand new one, The Pharaoh's Return, or The Return of the Pharaoh, The Return of the Pharaoh. That'll be fun as well. So come back for all those shows. Gonna be a good time. The last thing I was gonna say, Frank's mentioned that, oh my God, Madeline Kahn was nominated for Blazing Saddles. Never knew. Didn't know that either.
Didn't know that either.
Another great movie. Another great movie.
Yeah.
And Frank says I need to wear all of my Mandalorian gear. I can do that. A couple was it last year? Frank sent me a box that he calls a Luke crate. A play on the term loot crate, which is a silly little box that people order that just is full of junk. But Frank sent me one, I think last year, that had a baby Yoda in it, had Mandalorian pajamas that I still wear because they're comfortable as heck. And like Mandalorian. So yeah, I can wear some Mandalorian gear when I do that show. I can do that show. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe because it helps the channel out. And I don't know if there's any movies you want me to talk about or any other guests you want me to bring back on, including Mathew. Comment below and let me know. But until then, I will see you all next week.
Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers.
Adios.
Thanks again, Luke.